In the earliest surviving battlefield captures, the machine does not first appear as a weapon. It appears as interference, Auspex returns flatten into dense signal bloom. Long-range lenses lose horizon reference as a moving vertical mass interrupts the skyline. Ground observers describe the same sequence with unusual consistency. Tremors first, then the collapse of ambient noise under pressure waves, then a shape resolving through dust, smoke, or weather, with enough scale to distort judgment. Several records note that infantry who had previously fought armoured columns misidentified the approaching engine as a fortified structure in transit rather than a single mobile platform. At closer range, the error became impossible to maintain. The structure possessed gait, directional intent, and weapons alignment. It was not a fortress being transported, it was a fortress that walked. Within the archive traditions of the Imperium, that repeated investigative pattern leads to one designation: the Warlord Class Titan. Its origins lie far deeper than most Imperial war machines. The Warlord pattern is consistently described as older than the Imperium itself, with some examples believed to preserve lineages reaching back to the Dark Age of technology, and many others known to have served since the Great Crusade. That immense age is not treated in the lore as a mere ceremonial distinction. It explains why the Warlord became one of the most familiar and durable expressions of Titan warfare within the Collegia Titanica. Across millennia of conflict, the pattern endured not because it remained unchanged, but because it proved adaptable enough to survive doctrinal shifts, regional forged traditions, battlefield innovation, and the catastrophic attrition of long Imperial history. By the time of the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy, the Warlord had already become a principal battle engine of the Titan legions, present in substantial numbers on both loyalist and traitor sides. That scale of deployment tells its own story. The Warlord was not an experimental rarity or a ceremonial relic. It was a mature and trusted design used when the Imperium required overwhelming force, delivered through a platform that could survive prolonged combat. The development of the class appears to have followed the broader Imperial logic of survivable concentration of force. Titans in general began as ancient human technology intended to operate in hostile colonial environments before, in later ages, becoming the god engines of the Adeptus Mechanicus. The Warlord represents one of the clearest transformations of that inheritance into absolute war utility. Its humanoid frame was not only symbolic, it allowed elevation of critical systems far above ground threats, supported stable firing arcs for massive armament, and distributed colossal weight across articulated limbs that could cross devastated urban zones, industrial wastelands, ash plains, and prepared battlefields where ordinary vehicles would bog down, break apart, or lose strategic value. The class developed into a walking heavy fortress with enough protection, height, and weapons integration to dominate the mid to upper tier of land warfare. It remained below the truly rare Emperor class in sheer hierarchy of size, yet it became the more practical instrument of repeated deployment. In simple terms, the Imperium did not preserve the Warlord for myth alone. It preserved it because it worked, and because its balance of scale, resilience, and adaptable destructive power kept proving useful over 10,000 years of war. Construction traditions around the Warlord are inseparable from Mars and the Forge worlds that inherited or adapted its sacred design grammar. The Mars pattern is commonly treated as the oldest and most prestigious baseline, but the existence of multiple Forge patterns demonstrates that the class was never frozen into a single immutable shell. Lucius and Proximus examples are both recorded, and the lore also points to sub-patterns and specialist variants that emerge from the long service life of the chassis. This variation matters because it shows how the Warlord was built inside a culture of reverence mixed with necessity. The Mechanicus did not casually redesign such an engine, yet local manufacturing traditions, resource realities, and battlefield doctrine still produced visible differences. Some variants emphasize close assault, some emphasized general battlefield flexibility, and some incorporated unusual mission equipment. The surviving record mentions siege rams, assault pods, and even aircraft landing adaptations on certain forms, indicating that the Warlord chassis served as a stable platform for more than a single doctrinal role. That degree of modular longevity suggests development through accumulated sanctioned revision, rather than wholesale reinvention. The result was a class old enough to be holy, but practical enough to remain current. The physical construction of a warlord was defined by layered defense and elevation of function. The machine stood at roughly 32.76 meters in one-sided technical profile, though the lore also preserves conflicting accounts in broader discussions of Titan scale. Even the lower and more controlled figure still places it at a size where every design decision becomes structural theology as much as engineering. The legs were built and armoured to resist infantry attack, demolition efforts, and the cumulative punishment of heavy battlefield movement. Above them rose the massive trunk and armoured torso, housing the reactor core, command infrastructure, motive systems, weapon feed architecture, and shield integration. The head, placed high above the battlefield, served as the command chamber in many depictions, with the princeps enthroned and the command crew arranged around or beneath. This elevation did more than create visual dominance. It reduced vulnerability to the kind of direct ground assault that kills conventional armoured vehicles. The battlefield below became something observed from a great height, processed through machine senses and command interfaces rather than simple line of sight. The Warlord was therefore constructed to fight as a superior vertical presence, placing its mind above the war and its firepower across it. Development of the Warlord also meant solving the problem of sustaining impossible power. The class is associated with a plasma reactor, including references to a Theta Maximal type plasma reactor in one technical summary, and nearly every description of the Titan's battlefield role assumes a power output sufficient to sustain massive primary armaments, secondary batteries, locomotion, life support, and multiple void shields simultaneously. This was not just a large engine strapped to a tall frame, it was a mobile power economy, a machine whose every system demanded constant regulation, ritual maintenance, and technical supervision. The void shield array forms an important part of that developmental logic. 6 shield generators are mentioned in one overview, and the lore credits them with absorbing extraordinary incoming punishment before impacts ever reach the hull. Beneath those shields lay meters of armour, often described in composite forms such as ceramite and plasteel, turning the Warlord into a layered survivability system rather than a single shell. The engine's design therefore evolved around a principle seen repeatedly in Imperial heavy warcraft. Do not rely on one barrier when several nested barriers can preserve function under extreme fire. By the time a Warlord's actual hull is being struck, a great deal has already gone wrong for the machine, and often even then not enough has gone wrong to stop it. Its long development history also produced a class whose battlefield identity was defined by flexibility without loss of stature. The Warlord carried 4 major hardpoints in the standard understanding of the pattern, with arm-mounted primary weapons and carapace, mounted secondary systems capable of being configured for different forms of engagement. That adaptability appears throughout the canon references to the class, and helps explain why it became so widespread. A Titan that can only do one thing well becomes a strategic liability in a civilization as fractured and logistically inconsistent as the Imperium. The Warlord instead became a platform that could be armed for siege reduction, anti-armor duels, broad fire support, or mixed operational roles. Even before discussing specific weapons in the following part, this matters for its history because it reveals what kind of machine the Mechanicus kept choosing to build. The Warlord was not merely huge, it was useful across campaigns. It could level cities, destroy armies, and engage lesser Titans with decisive advantage, while still being common enough to shape doctrine rather than simply punctuate it. In that sense, its development was not only technical, it was institutional. Whole battle plans could be constructed around the assumption that a Warlord would be present, and that its presence would alter the geometry of war. No account of the class's construction is complete without the human and post-human infrastructure built into it from the beginning. Even where sources differ on exact crew totals, they broadly agree that a Warlord required a princeps and multiple specialist operators, often including moderati, technical personnel, servitors, and in some accounts substantially larger supporting complements. This is important because it prevents the Warlord from being misunderstood as a giant tank with a pilot. It was a moving command ecology. Its construction had to accommodate command interfaces, maintenance routes, sanctified systems access, sensor operation, motive control, and combat coordination while under fire. Some sources preserve older concepts in which multiple moderati each oversaw one of the Titan's primary weapons, while later depictions identify more specialized roles, such as a second in command, a sensori responsible for sensor systems, and a steersman responsible for locomotion. That variation itself reflects the depth of the class's history. Over time, not only hardware but also crew doctrine developed around how best to master such a machine. A Warlord was therefore constructed as much around control architecture as around armour and reactor mass. It required a mind network inside the hull because no single unassisted operator could truly manage its full battlefield complexity. The reason the Warlord endured is ultimately straightforward. It sat at a brutal and effective midpoint in the hierarchy of giant war engines. It was not the absolute apex of Titan scale, but it was powerful enough to function as the practical face of God engine warfare. It could survive the environments in which lesser machines would die, carry enough armament to decide planetary engagements, and remain adaptable enough for Forge Worlds to preserve, revere, and continue fielding its pattern across ages that destroyed civilizations. In the archive record, machines that old often become unusable relics, their sanctity outliving their utility. The Warlord avoided that fate. It remained sacred because it remained relevant. Its construction, development, and continued service show a rare continuity between ancient human technological inheritance, Mechanicus, religious engineering, and the military demands of the Imperium at full scale. When later chapters move into weapon loadouts, battlefield roles, and the darker layers of interpretation surrounding these engines, that deeper fact should stay in view. The Warlord is not simply remembered because it is large, it is remembered because the Imperium kept needing exactly what it was built to be. The Warlord Class Titan presents a form that is immediately distinguishable, even among other engines of the Collegia Titanica. Its silhouette is defined by proportion rather than ornamentation. The upper mass of the torso is broad and heavily armoured, balanced on two immense articulated legs whose structure is both functional and stabilizing. The head unit, often described as cathedral-like in its geometry, is mounted forward on the torso and elevated above the battlefield to provide command visibility and sensor integration. Unlike smaller armoured vehicles which compress their systems into a compact hull, the Warlord distributes its systems vertically, allowing separation of critical components across multiple armoured layers. This creates a machine that is not only tall but internally compartmentalized, increasing survivability during sustained engagement. The external design reflects both engineering necessity and ritualized construction practices of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Armor plating is layered in thick, overlapping segments, composed primarily of ceramite and plasteel composites. These plates are not uniform across the body. Heavier reinforcement is observed around the torso, reactor housing, and primary weapon mount points, while the leg assemblies balance armor with mobility requirements. The joints themselves are protected by additional plating and mechanical shielding, yet they remain one of the few areas where concentrated enemy fire can yield meaningful structural damage if the void shields fail. Despite this, the Warlord's leg assemblies are engineered to endure both the machine's own immense weight and the repeated stress of battlefield traversal across unstable terrain. Height estimates for the Warlord Class Titan vary across records, but a commonly referenced technical profile places it at approximately 32.76 meters. At this scale, the Titan operates above most battlefield obstructions. Buildings that would conceal armoured companies become partial cover at best. Infantry formations are rendered insignificant in terms of physical threat, though not entirely irrelevant when equipped with specialised anti-Titan weaponry. The Warlord's mass is sufficient to generate measurable ground impact with each step, and its movement alone can disrupt fortifications, collapse weakened structures, and alter terrain conditions during prolonged operations. This is not incidental. The Titan's size is itself a form of battlefield influence, shaping engagements before weapons are even discharged. The internal structure is organised around a central plasma reactor, which provides the energy required to sustain all primary systems. References to a Theta Maximal class reactor indicate output levels far exceeding conventional vehicle power plants. This reactor supports locomotion, weapon systems, command interfaces, environmental systems, and most critically, the Void Shield Array. The energy demands of the Warlord are continuous and extreme. Even at rest, the Titan requires constant regulation, monitoring, and maintenance. During combat, power allocation becomes a dynamic process, with energy redirected between shields, weapons, and movement systems, depending on tactical requirements. This constant redistribution is one of the defining operational characteristics of the class. The Void Shield system forms the first and most important layer of the Warlord's defensive capability. Standard configurations reference 6 Void Shield generators, each capable of absorbing or deflecting incoming fire until its threshold is exceeded. These shields do not function as a single barrier. Instead, they operate as layered fields that collapse individually under sufficient strain and then attempt to regenerate if given time and energy. This creates a defensive profile where the Titan can absorb sustained bombardment that would immediately destroy lesser war machines. However, once the shields are depleted, the Titan becomes reliant on its physical armor, and concentrated fire at that stage can produce cumulative damage. Beneath the Void Shields lies the Titan's armored hull, constructed with significant thickness and durability. Ceramite provides resistance to high-energy weaponry, while plasteel contributes structural integrity and impact resistance. The torso, housing the reactor and primary command systems, receives the highest degree of protection. This reflects a design philosophy centered on preserving operational continuity. As long as the core systems remain functional, the Titan can continue to fight even after sustaining extensive external damage. Secondary systems, including weapon mounts and auxiliary structures, can be lost without immediately disabling the engine, though such losses degrade combat effectiveness. The Warlord's offensive capabilities are defined by its weapon loadout flexibility. Standard configurations include 2 primary arm-mounted weapons and additional carapace-mounted systems. These weapons are not fixed across all Titans of the class. Instead, they are selected based on mission requirements, available resources, and Forge World traditions. This modular approach allows the Warlord to adapt to a wide range of battlefield roles without altering its core structure. The result is a platform capable of engaging targets ranging from massed infantry formations to heavily armoured vehicles and even other Titans. Among the most commonly referenced primary weapons are the Bellicosa pattern Volcano Cannon, the Apocalypse Missile Launcher, the Plasma Annihilator, and the Gatling Blaster. The Volcano Cannon is designed for extreme long-range engagement and delivers high-energy blasts capable of penetrating heavy armour and damaging or destroying other Titans. Its output is sufficient to compromise fortified structures and hardened installations with repeated strikes. The Plasma Annihilator provides sustained high-energy discharge, effective against both armoured targets and dense enemy formations. It generates significant heat and requires careful management to avoid system overload. The Gatling Blaster offers a different approach to firepower. It delivers rapid, sustained ballistic fire, making it effective against lighter vehicles, infantry concentrations, and defensive emplacements. While it lacks the singular destructive impact of heavier weapons, its rate of fire allows it to suppress and eliminate multiple targets in quick succession. The Apocalypse Missile Launcher, typically mounted on the carapace, provides long-range indirect fire capability. It can saturate wide areas with explosive payloads, making it effective for clearing entrenched positions or disrupting advancing forces before they close within effective range of other weapons. Carapace-mounted systems extend the Titan's engagement envelope. In addition to missile launchers, configurations may include laser blasters or defensive weaponry intended to counter aircraft and incoming threats. These systems allow the Warlord to engage targets across multiple vectors simultaneously. The Titan's height enhances this capability, providing unobstructed firing arcs that ground-based vehicles cannot achieve. This vertical advantage is a recurring factor in the Warlord's battlefield dominance, allowing it to project force across a wide area without repositioning. Targeting and sensor systems are integrated into the Titan's command architecture, allowing for coordinated engagement across all weapons. The Sensori, as part of the crew structure, manages data input from multiple detection systems, including visual, thermal, and auspex arrays. This information is processed and relayed to the princeps and moderati, enabling precise targeting even under conditions of limited visibility. The Titan does not rely solely on direct line of sight. Its systems allow it to detect and engage threats beyond immediate visual range, particularly when equipped with long-range weaponry. Mobility, while limited compared to smaller vehicles, is significant for a machine of its size. The Warlord's gait is deliberate and measured, prioritizing stability over speed. Each step is calculated to maintain balance while traversing uneven or compromised terrain. The leg assemblies include multiple articulation points, allowing the Titan to adjust its posture and maintain firing stability even while in motion. Although it cannot match the speed of lighter units, its ability to move through environments that would immobilize conventional armor gives it strategic flexibility. It can advance through ruined cities, industrial complexes, and battlefield debris fields without requiring prepared routes. Defensively, the Warlord benefits from both its layered protection and its ability to absorb damage over time. Unlike smaller vehicles, which may be destroyed by a single well-placed strike, the Warlord can sustain multiple critical hits and continue operating. This endurance is a defining trait. It allows the Titan to remain active in prolonged engagements where attrition would eliminate lesser units. However, this resilience is not absolute. Sustained fire, particularly from other Titans or specialized anti-Titan weaponry, can degrade its defenses and eventually lead to catastrophic failure. One of the more critical vulnerabilities lies in the interaction between its void shields and power systems. The shields require continuous energy input to remain active and to regenerate after collapse. If the reactor is damaged or if power is diverted heavily to weapons and locomotion, shield regeneration can be delayed or reduced. This creates windows of vulnerability that skilled opponents can exploit. Additionally, while the armor is extensive, it is not impervious. Repeated strikes at the same location can penetrate even the heaviest plating, particularly when shields are down. The Warlord's scale also introduces logistical considerations that influence its battlefield use. Its deployment requires significant support infrastructure, including maintenance crews, supply lines, and transport considerations. It cannot be deployed as rapidly or as flexibly as smaller units. Once committed to a battlefield, it becomes a central asset around which operations are often organized. This centrality is both a strength and a limitation. The Titan can dominate an area, but its presence also becomes a focal point for enemy targeting. In summary, the distinctive traits of the Warlord Class Titan emerge from the integration of scale, power, and adaptability. Its specifications reflect a machine built to endure and dominate rather than maneuver and evade. Its offensive capabilities allow it to engage and destroy a wide range of targets with overwhelming force, while its defensive systems enable it to survive conditions that would destroy most other war machines. The balance between these elements defines the Warlord's role within the Imperium's military structure. It is not merely a weapon, it is a sustained presence on the battlefield, capable of shaping the course of engagements through both its firepower and its resilience. The operation of a Warlord Class Titan is not centered on a single individual, but on a tightly integrated command organism distributed across multiple roles within the machine. At its core is the princeps, the primary operator and controlling intelligence of the Titan. The princeps does not pilot the engine in a conventional sense. Instead, the princeps is neurologically linked to the Titan through a command throne interface, allowing direct cognitive interaction with the machine's systems. This connection enables the princeps to perceive the battlefield through the Titan's sensorium as an extension of their own senses. Visual feeds, Thermal readings, Auspex returns, and internal diagnostics are processed as layered input, creating a form of awareness that exceeds normal human perception. This level of integration comes at a cost. The princeps must maintain constant mental discipline to avoid being overwhelmed by the volume of data and the machine's own machine spirit responses. The Titan is not passive. It contains a complex and often willful machine spirit that reflects its age, accumulated combat experience, and the rituals performed upon it. The princeps must assert control while also maintaining a form of symbiotic cooperation with this presence. In many recorded cases, prolonged service leads to psychological and physiological strain. Some princeps exhibit signs of detachment from their own physical bodies, identifying more closely with the Titan than with their human form. This effect is not incidental. It is a direct consequence of sustained neural immersion within a system designed to operate on a scale far beyond individual human experience. Supporting the princeps are the moderati, who function as secondary operators responsible for specific systems. In earlier doctrinal structures, moderati were often assigned directly to weapon systems, each controlling one of the Titan's primary armaments. Later operational configurations show more specialized roles, including a moderatus primus acting as second in command, a sensori responsible for managing sensor input and battlefield data, and a steersman overseeing locomotion and balance. These roles ensure that the Titan can operate efficiently under combat conditions where simultaneous control of movement, targeting, defense, and communication is required. The moderati act as both extensions of the princeps' intent and as independent operators capable of managing their assigned systems under directive guidance. The crew structure extends beyond these primary operators. Servitors are integrated into the Titan's internal systems to perform routine tasks, maintenance functions, and low-level operational duties. These cybernetic constructs reduce the burden on human crew members and ensure that essential processes continue even under adverse conditions. Technical personnel, including engineers and maintenance specialists, may be present within the Titan or operate in close support roles, performing ongoing diagnostics and repairs. The total crew complement varies across sources, with some accounts suggesting relatively compact operational teams and others indicating larger internal populations. This variation reflects differences in pattern, doctrine, and the specific requirements of individual Forge worlds. Life within a Warlord Titan is structured around continuous operation. The internal environment is controlled to support both human and machine function, with regulated atmosphere, temperature, and pressure systems. Movement within the Titan is constrained by narrow passageways, maintenance shafts, and compartmentalized sections. Crew members operate within assigned stations for extended periods, often under conditions of sustained stress during combat operations. Communication between crew members is maintained through internal systems, allowing coordination without reliance on external channels. The Titan functions as a closed system, capable of operating independently for extended durations as long as its power and supply requirements are met. The use case of the Warlord Class Titan is defined by its role as a primary battlefield asset within large-scale engagements. It is deployed where the Imperium requires decisive force applied over a wide area with sustained intensity. Unlike smaller units, which may be assigned to specific tactical objectives, the Warlord is often used to shape the overall battlefield environment. Its presence alters enemy movement, disrupts formations, and forces opposing forces to commit significant resources to counter it. This strategic influence is one of its defining characteristics. In siege operations, the Warlord serves as a mobile artillery platform and assault engine. Its heavy weapons can reduce fortified positions, breach defensive lines, and clear entrenched enemy forces. The Titan's durability allows it to advance under fire, absorbing damage while maintaining offensive output. This makes it particularly effective in environments where static defenses would otherwise halt or slow conventional forces. The Warlord's height provides a clear line of fire over walls, barricades, and urban structures, enabling it to engage targets that would be inaccessible to ground-based units. In open-field engagements, the Warlord operates as a force multiplier. It can engage multiple targets simultaneously, providing both direct fire support and area denial through its weapon systems. Its presence supports advancing infantry and armoured units by neutralising high-value targets and suppressing enemy concentrations. The Titan's ability to withstand sustained fire allows it to maintain position in contested areas, creating a stable point around which other units can manoeuvre. This stability is critical in prolonged engagements, where maintaining control of key terrain determines the outcome of the battle. Against other Titans and super-heavy units, the Warlord functions as a primary combatant. Its weapon systems are capable of engaging and destroying engines of similar or lesser scale, making it a central element in Titan-on-Titan warfare. These engagements are characterized by the interplay of void shields, armor, and firepower, with outcomes often determined by crew coordination, power management, and tactical positioning. The Warlord's balance of offensive capability and defensive resilience allows it to compete effectively in these encounters, though it remains vulnerable to concentrated fire and coordinated attacks. The deployment of a Warlord Titan is not undertaken lightly. It requires significant logistical preparation, including transport, maintenance support, and coordination with other units. Once deployed, the Titan becomes a focal point of both friendly and enemy operations. Command structures must account for its capabilities and limitations, integrating it into broader strategic plans. The Titan's movements and actions are often coordinated with other elements of the Titan Legion, as well as with conventional Imperial forces. This integration ensures that its capabilities are utilized effectively without exposing it to unnecessary risk. Despite its strengths, the Warlord is not without limitations. Its size and resource requirements restrict its deployment to situations where its presence is justified by the scale of the conflict. It cannot be rapidly redeployed or concealed, and its movements are predictable due to its scale and terrain constraints. These factors require careful planning and support to mitigate vulnerabilities. Additionally, the reliance on complex systems and specialized crew introduces points of failure that can impact performance if disrupted. The conclusion drawn from its design, operation, and use is that the Warlord Class Titan represents a convergence of human, mechanical, and doctrinal evolution within the Imperium. It is a machine that embodies the principles of durability, adaptability, and overwhelming force. Its crew structure reflects the need for coordinated human oversight of complex systems, while its battlefield role demonstrates the value of sustained, high-impact presence in large-scale warfare. The Warlord is not defined solely by its size or firepower, but by the integration of its components into a cohesive system capable of enduring and dominating in environments that exceed the capabilities of conventional forces. Its continued use across millennia indicates that it fulfills a role that has not been supplanted by newer designs. It remains a central element of the Imperium's military doctrine, deployed when the scale and intensity of conflict demand a response that only a machine of its magnitude can provide. In the broader context of Imperial warfare, the Warlord Class Titan stands as a persistent solution to the problem of overwhelming force projection. It is a machine built not for rapid victory, but for sustained dominance. Its presence on the battlefield is both a practical asset and a symbolic representation of the Imperium's approach to war. It advances, endures, and continues to fight until either the enemy is destroyed or the machine itself is brought down. Records attributed to the Adeptus Administratum and the Adeptus Mechanicus do not describe the Warlord Class Titan in abstract terms. They describe it through accumulated observation across repeated deployments, often framed as after-action analysis rather than theoretical doctrine. In these accounts, the Warlord is consistently treated as a stabilizing variable in otherwise unpredictable war zones. Its presence reduces uncertainty for Imperial command structures, not because it eliminates opposition, but because it imposes a predictable center of force around which operations can be organized. Administratum logistics reports frequently begin with environmental disruption. The arrival of a Warlord is preceded by measurable seismic activity, infrastructure strain, and atmospheric disturbance in urban or industrial zones. Roads fracture under its weight unless reinforced, HAB structures collapse if structurally compromised, and unprepared terrain is often rendered unusable for standard vehicle movement after repeated Titan passage. These observations are not presented as drawbacks, but as operational factors. Strategic planners account for the Titan's impact on terrain as part of its deployment value. In siege conditions, this disruption contributes to the breakdown of defensive geometry, weakening fortifications even before direct engagement begins. Mechanicus observation logs focus more heavily on system behavior during extended operation. One recurring note is the consistency of the Warlord's performance under sustained load. Unlike smaller armoured units, which degrade rapidly when pushed beyond optimal parameters, the Warlord demonstrates a capacity to maintain high output states for prolonged periods. Reactor strain, heat accumulation, and shield cycling are all recorded, yet the system remains functional within tolerances that would be considered critical failure thresholds in lesser machines. This endurance is not treated as incidental. It is identified as a defining characteristic that justifies the continued use of the class despite its immense resource demands. From a strategic perspective, Administratum records emphasize the Warlord's role as a force anchor. In multi-front engagements, where command cohesion can degrade due to communication delays or unit fragmentation, the presence of a Titan provides a fixed reference point. Units are directed to align their movements relative to the Titan's position, creating a localized structure within the broader battlefield. This reduces the likelihood of disorganized retreat or overextension. Infantry and armored units operating within the Titan's effective range show higher rates of sustained engagement, attributed to both the physical support provided by the Titan's firepower and the psychological reinforcement of its presence. Psychological impact is addressed in multiple administratum summaries, though often in restrained language. Enemy forces are observed to alter behavior upon confirmation of Titan deployment. Recorded responses include delayed advances, increased dispersion of units, and prioritization of anti-Titan weaponry over standard tactical objectives. These behavioral shifts create exploitable conditions. Dispersed enemy formations are more vulnerable to targeted strikes, while the diversion of resources toward anti-Titan measures reduces pressure on other Imperial units. The Warlord in this context functions as both a weapon and a catalyst for enemy misallocation. Mechanicus entries complement this analysis by noting the interaction between the Titan's machine spirit and its operational environment. While not universally quantified, there are repeated references to improved system responsiveness during prolonged combat engagement. It is suggested, though not definitively proven, that the machine spirit exhibits adaptive behavior when exposed to sustained conflict conditions. This is expressed through more efficient targeting alignment, reduced latency in command response, and increased stability in power distribution. Such observations remain partially interpretive, as the Mechanicus frames them within a theological understanding of machine function. Yet the consistency of these reports across different Forge worlds suggests a measurable effect. Strategic deployment patterns indicate that Warlord Titans are rarely committed in isolation unless operational necessity demands it. Administratum doctrine favors integration within larger Titan maniples or combined arms formations. When deployed alongside other Titans, the Warlord often assumes a central or forward position, leveraging its balance of firepower and durability. Lighter Titans operate in support roles, extending the engagement range and covering flanking vectors, while heavier or more specialized engines may be positioned for concentrated strikes. This coordinated approach maximizes the effectiveness of each unit, while reducing individual exposure to concentrated enemy fire. In urban environments, observations highlight the Warlord's ability to control vertical space. Its elevated firing position allows it to engage targets across multiple levels of a hive city or industrial complex. Enemy forces attempting to utilize elevation for cover or advantage find their positions compromised. Administratum planners note that this capability significantly reduces the effectiveness of entrenched defensive positions within multi-level structures. The Titan's presence transforms vertical terrain from an advantage into a liability for opposing forces. In open terrain, the Warlord's role shifts toward area denial and long-range engagement. Its weapon systems can cover extensive distances, forcing enemy units to either advance under sustained fire or reposition to less favourable ground. Administratum reports describe this as a compression effect, where enemy movement options are reduced, leading to predictable patterns that can be exploited by Imperial forces. The Titan's ability to maintain continuous fire over large areas contributes to this effect, creating zones where enemy presence becomes unsustainable. Mechanicus maintenance records provide additional insight into operational behaviour. Despite the complexity of the Warlord systems, field reports indicate that the Titan can continue functioning even when individual subsystems are compromised. Weapon mounts may be disabled, armour plating breached, or shield generators temporarily collapsed, yet the core systems remain active. This redundancy is a deliberate design feature, allowing the Titan to sustain combat effectiveness under conditions that would disable or destroy other units. The ability to continue operating despite damage is consistently identified as a critical advantage in prolonged engagements. Energy management emerges as a central theme in both Administratum and Mechanicus observations. The distribution of power between weapons, shields, and locomotion is not static. It requires continuous adjustment based on battlefield conditions. Administratum summaries note that experienced crews demonstrate higher efficiency in power allocation, maintaining shield integrity while sustaining offensive output. In contrast, less experienced crews may overcommit to offensive systems, resulting in reduced defensive capacity and increased vulnerability. This distinction highlights the importance of crew proficiency in maximizing the Titan's potential. The interaction between the Warlord and supporting forces is also documented. Infantry units operating in proximity to the Titan benefit from its suppressive fire and protective presence, but they must also adapt to its operational footprint. Movement patterns are adjusted to avoid interference with the Titan's path, and communication protocols are established to coordinate actions within its engagement zone. Administratum reports emphasize the need for disciplined coordination to prevent friendly interference and to fully utilize the Titan's capabilities. Mechanicus observations extend to post-engagement analysis. The condition of the Titan after battle provides data on system resilience and failure points. Repeated findings indicate that while external damage can be extensive, internal systems often remain intact, allowing for repair and redeployment. This recoverability is a significant factor in the long-term value of the Warlord class. The ability to restore a damaged Titan to operational status reduces the need for complete replacement, which would be resource-intensive and time-consuming. In summary, the combined observations of the Adeptus Administratum and the Adeptus Mechanicus present the Warlord Class Titan as a central instrument of Imperial warfare, defined by its ability to impose structure, absorb sustained damage, and influence enemy behavior. Its strategic use is characterized by integration within broader formations, deliberate positioning to maximize environmental advantage, and continuous adaptation of power and systems during combat. The Titan's effectiveness is not solely a function of its physical capabilities, but of the coordination between its crew, supporting forces, and command structures. These findings reinforce the understanding that the Warlord is not merely deployed for its destructive capacity. It is deployed because it creates conditions under which Imperial forces can operate with increased cohesion and reduced uncertainty. Its presence reshapes the battlefield, not only through direct engagement, but through the reactions it provokes and the structure it imposes on both allies and adversaries. Administratum fiscal archives and Mechanicus forge records rarely express the cost of a Warlord Class Titan in fixed currency or standardized units. Instead, cost is documented through allocation strain, resource diversion, and production time. A single Warlord represents the output of entire forge complexes operating over extended cycles, often measured in years rather than months. The materials required include vast quantities of refined metals, rare composites, plasma reactive components, and sanctified machine elements that cannot be substituted without doctrinal violation. These materials are not simply gathered, they are processed through ritualized fabrication chains that impose additional time and labor constraints. Administratum supply ledgers describe the construction of a Warlord as a priority tier allocation event. Entire production lines are redirected to support Titan assembly, often delaying or suspending the manufacture of lesser war machines. This is not considered inefficient, it is considered necessary. The resulting engine is expected to provide operational value equivalent to or exceeding that of multiple armoured divisions over its service life. The investment is justified through longevity and battlefield impact rather than immediate production efficiency. Mechanicus records emphasize the sanctity of the construction process. Each component is produced according to established patterns, with deviations permitted only under controlled conditions. The assembly of a Warlord is not treated as industrial manufacturing in the conventional sense. It is a layered process combining engineering precision with ritual observance. Machine spirits are invoked, calibrated, and bound to their respective systems during construction. This integration is considered essential for long-term operational stability. The time required for these processes contributes significantly to overall construction duration, yet they are not viewed as optional. Transport and assembly logistics further increase the effective cost. In many cases, components are manufactured across multiple forge sites and transported to a central location for final assembly. This requires coordination across interplanetary supply chains, including the use of heavy transport vessels and secure transit routes. Administratum records note that delays in any segment of this chain can extend construction timelines significantly. Once assembled, the Titan must undergo extensive testing, calibration, and consecration before it is deemed operational. Maintenance requirements for the Warlord are continuous and resource-intensive. Mechanicus logs indicate that even when not engaged in combat, the Titan requires constant monitoring and upkeep. Reactor systems must be stabilized, void shield generators calibrated, and mechanical components inspected for wear. Servitors perform routine maintenance tasks, while engine seers conduct more complex diagnostics and repairs. This ongoing maintenance ensures that the Titan remains in a state of readiness, but it also imposes a steady demand on resources and personnel. During active deployment, maintenance becomes more complex. Combat conditions introduce damage, heat stress, and system degradation that must be addressed in real time or during limited downtime. Mechanicus field reports describe the use of mobile support units equipped with specialized tools and replacement components. These units operate in proximity to the Titan, providing immediate assistance when possible. However, not all repairs can be conducted in the field. Severe damage may require withdrawal from the battlefield and transport to a forge facility for comprehensive restoration. Supply requirements extend beyond maintenance materials. The Warlord consumes significant energy and requires a steady supply of ammunition for its weapon systems. Plasma-based weapons demand careful handling and storage of volatile energy sources, while ballistic and missile systems require large quantities of munitions. Administratum logistics plans account for these needs by establishing dedicated supply lines, often prioritizing Titan resupply over other units. Disruption of these supply lines can reduce the Titan's operational effectiveness, particularly in prolonged engagements. The infrastructure required to support a Warlord includes not only material supply but also personnel. Skilled engine seers, trained crew members, and support staff must be available to maintain and operate the Titan. Training and replacement of these personnel represent an additional layer of cost. The loss of experienced crew members can significantly impact performance, as proficiency in operating and maintaining a Titan is developed over extended periods. Strength analysis within Administratum and Mechanicus records consistently highlights the Warlord's durability and sustained combat capability. The combination of void shields and heavy armor allows it to absorb damage that would destroy multiple conventional units. This resilience enables the Titan to remain active in high-intensity engagements, providing continuous support and maintaining pressure on enemy forces. Its weapon systems offer both range and destructive power, allowing it to engage a wide variety of targets effectively. Another identified strength is the Titan's operational longevity. Unlike many war machines that are expended within a single campaign, a warlord can remain in service for centuries or longer. This extended lifespan distributes its initial construction cost over a long period, increasing its overall value. Mechanicus records often reference Titans that have participated in multiple major conflicts across different eras, with ongoing maintenance preserving their functionality. The Warlord's adaptability is also noted as a strength. Its modular weapon systems allow it to be configured for different mission profiles, reducing the need for specialized variants. This flexibility simplifies deployment planning and allows the Titan to be reassigned as operational requirements change. Administratum reports indicate that this adaptability contributes to the Titan's frequent inclusion in diverse campaign types, from siege warfare to open field engagements. However, these strengths are balanced by identifiable weaknesses. The most significant is the resource burden associated with construction and maintenance. The commitment of materials, labour and time required to produce and sustain a warlord limits the number that can be fielded. This scarcity increases the strategic importance of each individual Titan and necessitates careful deployment to avoid unnecessary loss. Mobility limitations are also documented. While the warlord can traverse difficult terrain, its speed is limited, and its size restricts maneuverability in confined environments. This can be exploited by enemy forces capable of rapid movement, or by those employing tactics that avoid direct engagement. Administratum analyses note that while the Titan can dominate a localized area, it cannot respond quickly to threats outside its immediate operational zone. Dependence on support infrastructure represents another vulnerability. The Warlord's effectiveness is closely tied to the availability of maintenance, supply and command support. Disruption of these elements can degrade performance over time. For example, insufficient ammunition. Supply reduces offensive capability, while delayed maintenance can lead to system failures. Enemy strategies that target supply lines or support units can indirectly weaken the Titan's operational impact. Power management remains a critical factor in both strength and weakness. The need to balance energy distribution between shields, weapons, and locomotion introduces complexity into combat operations. Administratum reports indicate that mismanagement of power can lead to reduced defensive capability or diminished offensive output. In extreme cases, reactor instability can pose a risk to the Titan itself, though such events are rare and typically associated with severe damage or operational error. Structural vulnerabilities, while limited, are acknowledged. Joint assemblies and weapon mount points are identified as areas where concentrated fire can produce significant damage, particularly if void shields are compromised. While these areas are reinforced, they cannot be armoured to the same extent as the central torso without impairing mobility or functionality. Skilled adversaries may target these Nakat to degrade the Titan's effectiveness incrementally. In conclusion, the construction, maintenance, and operational profile of the Warlord Class Titan reflect a balance between immense capability and equally significant resource commitment. Administratum and Mechanicus records present it as a strategic asset whose value is derived from sustained performance, adaptability, and psychological impact on the battlefield. Its strengths lie in its durability, firepower, and longevity, while its weaknesses are primarily associated with resource demands, mobility constraints, and dependence on support systems. This analysis reinforces the understanding that the Warlord is not a universally applicable solution, but a specialized instrument deployed when its advantages outweigh its limitations. Its continued use across millennia indicates that, within the context of Imperial warfare, this balance has consistently favored its inclusion in major operations. Administratum war registers and Mechanicus battle logs record the Warlord Class Titan not as an occasional presence, but as a recurring instrument in the most decisive campaigns of Imperial history. Its appearance is most consistently associated with engagements where conventional force projection proved insufficient, or where the scale of resistance required a sustained application of overwhelming firepower. Across these records, the Warlord is rarely described in isolation. It is documented within the operational structure of Titan legions, deployed alongside engines of varying classes, yet repeatedly identified as a central contributor to battlefield outcomes. In the campaigns of the Great Crusade, archived summaries describe the Warlord as a principal engine used in planetary compliance actions against fortified or technologically advanced adversaries. Administratum observations note that in these early deployments, the Titan's role extended beyond destruction. It functioned as a demonstration of Imperial capability, often preceding or accompanying diplomatic overtures. Where compliance failed, the transition to active engagement was immediate. Mechanicus records from this period emphasize the reliability of the Warlord under extended operational conditions, with multiple engagements conducted across successive planetary surfaces without full refit. This early demonstration of endurance established the class as a standard component of large-scale Imperial offensives. During the Horus Heresy, the Warlord Class Titan appears in extensive and often fragmented records due to the scale and disruption of the conflict. Both loyalist and traitor forces deployed Warlord engines in significant numbers, leading to direct Titan-on-Titan engagements of unprecedented intensity. Administratum compilations of these battles highlight the destructive capacity of such encounters. Entire urban sectors were reduced to debris fields, and environmental conditions were altered to the point of long-term uninhabitability. Mechanicus logs from surviving engines indicate that Warlords were capable of sustaining multiple direct hits from equivalent class weaponry while continuing to operate, though cumulative damage often led to eventual system failure. One recurring observation from Heresy-era records is the role of coordinated fire in overcoming Warlord defences. Single-engine engagements, while destructive, often resulted in prolonged exchanges with no immediate decisive outcome. In contrast, coordinated strikes involving multiple Titans or combined arms support were more effective in breaching void shields and compromising structural integrity. This finding influenced subsequent deployment doctrine, reinforcing the preference for operating Warlords within organised maniples rather than as isolated units. Post-Heresy campaigns continue to document the Warlord's effectiveness in both siege and open-field engagements. Administratum battle reports from Hive City conflicts describe the Titan's ability to systematically dismantle defensive structures. Its elevated firing position allowed it to target command centers, shield generators, and fortified strongpoints with precision. Mechanicus assessments note that the integration of sensor data with weapon systems enabled accurate targeting, even in densely built environments where line-of-sight limitations would hinder conventional units. The result was a reduction in engagement time and a corresponding decrease in Imperial casualties. In open-terrain engagements, records indicate that the Warlord's presence often dictated the flow of battle. Enemy forces were observed to adjust their formations and movement patterns to avoid direct engagement, leading to predictable positioning that could be exploited by Imperial commanders. Administratum analyses describe this as a form of indirect control, where the Titan's threat projection influenced enemy decisions without requiring constant direct fire. This effect enhanced the effectiveness of supporting units, which could operate within a more structured and predictable combat environment. Mechanicus battle logs provide detailed accounts of system performance under varying conditions. In prolonged engagements, the Warlord consistently demonstrated the ability to maintain operational capability despite cumulative damage. Void shield cycling, armor degradation, and weapon system wear were all recorded, yet the Titan remained functional within acceptable parameters. This resilience is frequently cited as a key factor in its effectiveness. Unlike smaller units, which may be rendered inoperable by a single critical hit, the Warlord can absorb and adapt to sustained damage, continuing to contribute to the engagement. However, battle records also document instances of Warlord loss, providing insight into the limits of its effectiveness. In engagements where enemy forces successfully concentrated fire or deployed specialized anti-Titan weaponry, Warlords were eventually overwhelmed. Administratum summaries of such events emphasize the importance of support and coordination. Isolated Titans, or those operating without adequate support, were more vulnerable to targeted attacks. Mechanicus analyses of destroyed engines often identify shield failure followed by repeated strikes on critical structural nicut as the primary sequence leading to loss. The effectiveness of the Warlord is also influenced by crew performance. Administratum records note variations in outcome based on the experience and coordination of the Titan's crew. Engines operated by seasoned princeps and well-trained moderati demonstrate higher rates of sustained engagement and successful target elimination. Mechanicus logs correlate these outcomes with more efficient power management, precise targeting, and effective response to system stress. In contrast, less experienced crews exhibit slower reaction times and less optimal resource allocation, reducing overall effectiveness. Another factor documented in battle records is the interaction between the Warlord and environmental conditions. In stable terrain, the Titan operates at peak efficiency, with predictable movement and firing stability. In unstable or heavily damaged environments, performance can be affected by footing and structural integrity of the ground. Administratum reports note that while the Warlord is capable of traversing difficult terrain, such conditions can limit movement speed and increase the risk of imbalance. These factors are considered during deployment planning to ensure that the Titan's capabilities are not unnecessarily constrained. Mechanicus records also address post-engagement recovery and redeployment. Many Warlords that sustained significant damage were successfully repaired and returned to service. This recoverability contributes to the class's long-term effectiveness, allowing it to participate in multiple campaigns over extended periods. The ability to restore functionality after severe damage reduces the overall cost of deployment and reinforces the value of maintaining existing engines rather than constructing new ones. Across all documented engagements, a consistent conclusion emerges regarding the Warlord's role. It is not a rapid response asset or a tool for precision strikes. Its effectiveness lies in sustained presence, continuous pressure, and the ability to absorb and deliver damage over extended periods. Administratum and Mechanicus perspectives converge on this point, identifying the Warlord as a cornerstone of large-scale Imperial warfare. The cumulative analysis of wars and battle records indicates that the Warlord Class Titan achieves its highest effectiveness when deployed within a coordinated framework that maximizes its strengths and mitigates its limitations. It excels in environments where prolonged engagement is required and where its durability and firepower can be fully utilized. Its presence alters both the physical and psychological landscape of the battlefield, contributing to outcomes that extend beyond immediate tactical considerations. In conclusion, the Warlord Class Titan is validated through repeated use across the Imperium's most significant conflicts. Its effectiveness is not measured solely by the destruction it causes, but by the stability it provides to Imperial operations and the pressure it exerts on opposing forces. Administratum and Mechanicus records present a consistent assessment. When properly supported and operated, the Warlord remains one of the most reliable and impactful instruments of war available to the Imperium. Inquisition archive material concerning the Warlord Class Titan diverges in tone and intent from Administratum and Mechanicus records. Where those institutions document performance, cost, and deployment, inquisitorial reports focus on irregularities, deviations, and patterns that do not align with expected operational behavior. The Warlord is not examined solely as a war engine. It is treated as a potential anomaly-bearing construct, shaped by millennia of service, repeated reconstruction, and prolonged interaction between human cognition and machine spirit architecture. The resulting body of observations does not contradict its battlefield effectiveness, but it introduces a layer of uncertainty regarding the deeper nature of its operation. One of the most consistently recorded observations involves the relationship between the princeps and the Titan over extended service periods. Inquisition dossiers describe cases where the cognitive boundary between operator and machine becomes progressively indistinct. While the Mechanicus acknowledges a degree of neural integration as necessary for effective control, inquisitorial reports suggest that this integration may extend beyond functional limits. Subjects are noted to exhibit altered behavioral patterns, including diminished attachment to their physical form and increased identification with the Titan's structure and sensory systems. In some cases, this progression is described as irreversible. The individual ceases to perceive themselves as separate from the machine, instead functioning as an embedded consciousness within it. It is further noted that these effects are not uniform across all operators. Some princeps maintain clear cognitive separation throughout their service, while others demonstrate early onset of integration-related anomalies. This inconsistency has led to speculation that factors beyond standard neural interfacing may be involved. Inquisition analysts propose several possibilities, including variations in machine spirit disposition, differences in ritual calibration during bonding, or exposure to anomalous environmental conditions during prior deployments. None of these explanations are confirmed, and the phenomenon remains classified as partially understood. Observations concerning the machine spirit itself are treated with particular scrutiny. Mechanicus doctrine holds that all complex machines possess a machine spirit, and that proper ritual interaction ensures stable operation. Inquisition records do not dispute this framework, but they document instances where the behavior of a Titan's machine spirit appears to exceed expected parameters. Reports describe moments of autonomous system adjustment, where targeting alignment, power distribution, or defensive responses occur without direct command input. These events are not framed as system errors. In many cases, they result in improved combat outcomes. However, the absence of explicit operator initiation raises questions regarding the degree of autonomy present within the system. Some Inquisition analysts interpret these occurrences as evidence of adaptive learning within the machine spirit, accumulated over centuries of combat. Others consider the possibility that the machine spirit retains residual imprints of previous operators, effectively integrating multiple layers of experience into its current state. A more cautious interpretation suggests that these behaviors may be artifacts of complex system interactions rather than true autonomy. Despite these differing perspectives, the consistency of such reports across multiple Titan legions has led to their classification as a recurring anomaly rather than isolated incidents. Another area of observation involves the persistence of operational patterns across different engagements and crews. In certain cases, Titans are recorded as exhibiting consistent tactical preferences regardless of the assigned princeps. These preferences include favoured engagement ranges, weapon prioritization, and movement patterns. While these tendencies can be attributed to structural characteristics or crew training, Inquisition reports note instances where newly assigned crews adopt similar behaviours without explicit instruction. This has led to speculation that the Titan itself may influence operator decision-making through subtle feedback mechanisms within the neural interface. Environmental interactions also feature prominently in Inquisition records. Warlord Titans deployed in regions with high levels of warp activity or prolonged exposure to anomalous conditions are observed to exhibit deviations in system performance. These include fluctuations in sensor accuracy, irregular shield behavior, and intermittent disruptions in command response. While such effects can be attributed to external interference, some reports suggest that the Titan's internal systems may retain residual effects even after leaving the affected area. These residual anomalies are difficult to quantify and are often classified as inconclusive, yet their repeated occurrence warrants continued observation. Conspiracy findings within Inquisition archives extend beyond technical anomalies to include broader considerations of control and knowledge distribution. One recurring theme is the degree of information withheld by the Adeptus Mechanicus regarding Titan construction and operation. Inquisition analysts note that access to detailed schematics and system architectures is heavily restricted, even within authorized channels. This limitation complicates independent verification of reported behaviors and restricts the ability to conduct comprehensive investigations. Some within the Inquisition speculate that the Mechanicus may possess deeper knowledge of Titan machine spirits and their potential for autonomy than is publicly acknowledged. Additional speculation concerns the origins of the Warlord design itself. While it is widely accepted that the class traces back to the Dark Age of technology, the extent to which original design principles have been preserved or altered remains unclear. Inquisition records reference fragmentary data suggesting that certain subsystems may operate on principles not fully understood by current Mechanicus doctrine. These fragments are often incomplete and lack corroboration, leading to their classification as unverified. Nevertheless, they contribute to an ongoing hypothesis that the Warlord may incorporate legacy technologies whose full capabilities are not entirely controlled. Observations of battlefield aftermath provide further context for these concerns. In engagements where warlords have been destroyed, Inquisition recovery teams have documented instances of system behavior persisting beyond expected operational limits. Reports include residual energy discharges, intermittent activation of subsystems, and in rare cases partial reactivation of internal processes without an active crew. These occurrences are typically short-lived and cease following containment procedures, yet they raise questions regarding the persistence of machine spirit activity, independent of standard control structures. It is important to note that not all Inquisition findings suggest instability or threat. Many reports conclude that the Warlord Class Titan operates within acceptable parameters and remains a critical asset to the Imperium. The anomalies documented are often described as edge cases, occurring under specific conditions rather than representing systemic flaws. However, the Inquisition's mandate requires that even low probability risks be examined and recorded, particularly when dealing with systems of such scale and influence. In summary, the Inquisition perspective on the Warlord Class Titan is characterized by cautious observation and ongoing investigation. The Titan is acknowledged as a highly effective war engine, yet it is also recognized as a complex system with layers of interaction that are not fully understood. The relationship between operator and machine, the behavior of the machine spirit, and the influence of environmental factors all contribute to a profile that extends beyond conventional mechanical analysis. These findings do not diminish the Titan's value. Instead, they frame it as an asset that requires continued scrutiny alongside its operational use. The Warlord remains a cornerstone of Imperial military capability, but from the Inquisition's viewpoint, it is also a subject of interest whose deeper characteristics may hold implications for both technology and doctrine. Inquisition. Interrogative records concerning the Warlord Class Titan are derived from structured debriefings, post-engagement examinations and controlled investigations conducted under conditions where deviations from expected behavior were suspected. These records do not rely on single testimonies. They are compiled through repeated cross-examination of princeps, moderati, engine seers, and attached support personnel, with particular attention given to inconsistencies in reported experience versus recorded system output. The resulting findings are not uniform, but they establish patterns that the Inquisition classifies as operational anomalies requiring continued monitoring. Interrogation of princeps following extended deployment cycles reveals recurring descriptions of altered perception during neural linkage. Subjects report expansion of sensory awareness beyond discrete data interpretation, describing battlefield conditions as continuous environmental states rather than segmented inputs. While such perception aligns with the intended function of the command interface, several interrogations indicate that the intensity of this experience can exceed manageable thresholds. In these cases, princeps describe difficulty disengaging from the Titan's sensory network even after formal decoupling procedures. Residual sensory impressions persist, including phantom feedback corresponding to movement, impact, or energy discharge that no longer physically occurs. Further interrogation identifies a secondary pattern involving time perception. Certain operators report compression or expansion of perceived time intervals during high-intensity engagements. Actions that correspond to standard response durations in recorded data are experienced subjectively as prolonged sequences, allowing detailed processing of events. Conversely, extended operational periods are sometimes perceived as significantly shorter than their recorded duration. These distortions are not consistently present across all subjects, but their recurrence suggests a correlation with prolonged neural immersion and the processing capacity of the Titan's command interface. Moderati and support crew interrogations provide complementary data. While these individuals do not experience the same level of neural integration as the princeps, they report indirect effects linked to the Titan's operational state. In some cases, moderati describe anticipatory responses to system changes, initiating adjustments before receiving explicit instruction. These actions often align with subsequent commands from the princeps, leading to speculation that the command interface may facilitate a form of shared cognitive alignment among crew members. This phenomenon is not formally acknowledged by Mechanicus doctrine, and its existence remains unconfirmed, yet repeated testimony has resulted in its classification as a potential low-level synchronization effect. Anomaly reports collected by the Inquisition focus on system behavior that cannot be fully attributed to operator input or environmental interference. One category of such reports involves autonomous recalibration events. These are instances where power distribution, targeting alignment, or shield modulation occurs without recorded command input. In many documented cases, these adjustments result in improved system performance, such as optimized energy allocation or more accurate targeting solutions. The absence of direct operator initiation, however, places these events outside standard operational parameters. Another category involves residual system activity following shutdown or severe damage. In controlled investigations of incapacitated Titans, Inquisition teams have recorded intermittent activation of subsystems after primary power has been disengaged. These activations include minor energy discharges, sensor flickers, and partial movement of mechanical components. While these events are typically brief and diminish over time, they raise questions regarding the persistence of internal system states beyond active control. Mechanicus explanations attribute such behavior to residual energy within capacitors and feedback loops, but the irregular timing and selective activation patterns have led some Inquisition analysts to consider alternative interpretations. Environmental anomaly reports further complicate the operational profile of the Warlord. Deployments in regions with elevated warp activity or unstable atmospheric conditions are associated with increased frequency of irregular system behavior. These include temporary loss of sensor coherence, delayed command response, and fluctuations in void shield stability. While external interference provides a plausible explanation, certain reports indicate that these anomalies persist beyond the duration of exposure. Subsequent deployments in stable environments occasionally reproduce similar irregularities, suggesting that the Titan may retain residual effects from prior conditions. Beneficial findings identified through these investigations focus primarily on adaptive system behavior. The capacity for autonomous recalibration, when functioning within controlled limits, enhances the Titan's responsiveness to dynamic combat conditions. Improved targeting accuracy, efficient power distribution, and rapid shield modulation contribute directly to battlefield effectiveness. Interrogation data also suggests that experienced crews develop an intuitive alignment with the Titan systems, reducing reaction times and increasing operational efficiency. This alignment, while not fully understood, is consistently associated with higher performance outcomes. Another beneficial aspect is the apparent accumulation of operational familiarity within the Titan itself. Although not formally recognized as memory in a conventional sense, repeated patterns of behavior across different crews indicate that the machine may retain a form of experiential imprint. This manifests as consistent tactical preferences and system responses that align with prior engagements. From an Inquisition perspective, this phenomenon enhances effectiveness by providing a form of continuity across deployments, even when crew composition changes. Detrimental findings are primarily associated with the limits of human-machine integration. The psychological effects observed in princeps, including detachment from physical identity and persistent sensory overlap, pose long-term risks to operator stability. In extreme cases, subjects exhibit reduced capacity for independent decision-making outside the context of the Titan systems. This dependency complicates reassignment and recovery, requiring specialized intervention to restore baseline cognitive function. System-level anomalies also present potential risks. Autonomous behavior, while beneficial in controlled instances, introduces uncertainty into command reliability. The inability to fully predict or replicate these behaviors limits the ability to integrate them into formal doctrine. In scenarios where system responses diverge from operator intent, even if momentarily, the potential for unintended outcomes increases. While no confirmed cases of hostile or adversarial system behavior are recorded in this context, the absence of complete understanding necessitates continued caution. Environmental sensitivity represents an additional detriment. The correlation between anomalous conditions and system irregularities indicates that the Warlord's performance can be influenced by factors beyond direct control. This introduces variability into operational planning, particularly in regions where environmental stability cannot be guaranteed. The persistence of residual effects further complicates this issue, as prior exposure may influence future performance in unpredictable ways. In conclusion, Inquisition interrogative findings and anomaly reports present a complex profile of the Warlord Class Titan. The machine demonstrates capabilities that extend beyond standard mechanical operation, including adaptive responses and potential continuity of behavior across deployments. These characteristics contribute to its effectiveness, but also introduce elements of uncertainty that cannot be fully resolved within current understanding. The balance between beneficial and detrimental findings underscores the need for continued observation and controlled investigation. The Warlord remains a critical asset, yet its deeper operational characteristics require careful management to ensure that its advantages are preserved without introducing unacceptable risk. From the Inquisition perspective, the Titan is both a proven instrument of war and an ongoing subject of scrutiny, reflecting the broader Imperium's reliance on technologies that are powerful, enduring, and not entirely understood. Inquisition priority registers concerning the Warlord Class Titan consolidate findings that are not classified as routine anomalies, but as conditions requiring immediate recognition and, where necessary, intervention. These urgent findings are not derived from isolated incidents. They emerge from repeated cross-analysis of interrogation data, battlefield recovery logs, and long-duration observation of Titan legions operating across multiple theatres. The purpose of these records is not to question the Titan's utility, but to define the thresholds at which its operational profile may transition from controlled asset to unpredictable variable. One of the most frequently elevated warning conditions involves progressive identity convergence between princeps and engine. While earlier findings document gradual integration as a byproduct of neural linkage, urgent classifications are applied when that integration begins to alter command hierarchy itself. In such cases, the princeps does not simply identify with the Titan. The Titan becomes the dominant frame of reference through which all decisions are made. Interrogation transcripts describe operators referring to external units, including allied forces, as peripheral elements rather than coordinated assets. This shift correlates with reduced responsiveness to external command structures and increased prioritization of self-directed engagement patterns. In extreme instances, the princeps exhibits resistance to disengagement protocols. Attempts to sever neural linkage are met with physiological distress responses, including elevated neural activity and loss of motor function outside the command interface. While such cases are rare, their existence has led to the classification of prolonged, uninterrupted command cycles as a risk factor. Inquisition advisories recommend enforced rotation intervals and monitored disengagement procedures to prevent escalation beyond recoverable limits. A second category of urgent findings concerns machine spirit dominance indicators. These are identified when system behavior consistently precedes or overrides operator input in a manner that cannot be attributed to latency or predictive alignment. Unlike the adaptive recalibration events documented in prior reports, dominance indicators involve sustained patterns where the Titan appears to initiate and maintain operational sequences independently. Recorded examples include preemptive targeting adjustments without sensor confirmation, power redistribution that conflicts with issued commands, and movement corrections executed prior to crew directive. Mechanicus interpretations of such behavior vary, often framing it as optimal system function or alignment with the Omnissiah's will. Inquisition analysis does not dismiss these interpretations but emphasizes the risk associated with diminished operator authority. When command input is no longer the primary driver of system behavior, accountability and predictability are compromised. As a result, Titans exhibiting repeated dominance indicators are flagged for intensified observation and, in some cases, temporary withdrawal from active deployment pending further evaluation. Residual activity persistence following shutdown has also been elevated to urgent status under specific conditions. While minor subsystem activation after power disengagement is documented and often attributed to residual energy, certain cases demonstrate coordinated sequences that extend beyond random discharge. These include sequential activation of sensor arrays, localized power routing to intact systems, and limited mechanical articulation. The duration of such events is typically brief, but their structured nature suggests internal processes operating independently of external control. Inquisition containment protocols for such occurrences involve immediate isolation of the engine, followed by layered deactivation procedures and, where necessary, controlled disassembly of affected subsystems. The primary concern is not immediate threat, as no verified instances of hostile autonomous action have been recorded, but the potential for escalation if underlying causes remain unaddressed. The persistence of these events across multiple recovered engines indicates that they are not singular malfunctions but part of a broader pattern requiring continued scrutiny. Environmental sensitivity, previously noted as a contributing factor to system irregularities, is reclassified as a warning condition when residual effects persist across multiple deployments. Titans exposed to high warp flux environments or prolonged anomalous conditions are observed to retain altered operational characteristics even after return to stable regions. These characteristics include intermittent sensor distortion, irregular shield regeneration cycles, and sporadic latency in command execution. Inquisition analysts identify a threshold at which these residual effects transition from manageable variance to operational risk. When anomalies begin to interfere with core system reliability, the Titan's effectiveness is compromised, and the potential for unintended outcomes increases. Recommended actions include comprehensive recalibration, extended diagnostic cycles, and, in severe cases, partial system replacement. The effectiveness of these measures varies, and long-term monitoring is required to confirm restoration of baseline performance. Warning signs are not limited to system behavior. Crew interaction patterns also provide indicators of emerging instability. Reports describe instances where moderati and support personnel exhibit synchronized responses that exceed standard coordination protocols. While low-level synchronization has been noted as a potential efficiency factor, heightened synchronization without explicit communication raises concerns regarding shared cognitive influence. In such cases, crew members demonstrate parallel decision-making processes, often aligning with system behavior rather than direct command input. This phenomenon, while not fully understood, is treated as a potential amplification of the neural interface's influence. The risk lies in the possibility of collective deviation, where multiple crew members simultaneously align with anomalous system behavior, reducing the likelihood of corrective intervention. Inquisition guidelines recommend increased monitoring of crew interaction patterns and the implementation of independent verification protocols to ensure that command decisions remain grounded in external oversight. Another warning condition involves deviations in established tactical patterns. Warlord Titans are known to develop consistent operational preferences over time, but abrupt changes in these patterns without corresponding. Changes in crew or mission parameters are flagged for investigation. Such deviations may indicate underlying system or cognitive shifts that are not immediately visible through standard diagnostics. Inquisition reports emphasize the importance of correlating tactical behavior with system data to identify discrepancies that may signal deeper issues. Despite these warning signs, it is important to contextualize their frequency and impact. The majority of Warlord Class Titans operate within acceptable parameters throughout their service life. Urgent findings represent a subset of cases where multiple risk factors converge. The Inquisition does not classify the class as inherently unstable or unreliable. Instead, it identifies specific conditions under which stability may degrade, requiring proactive management to maintain operational integrity. The conclusion drawn from these urgent findings is not one of condemnation, but of controlled reliance. The Warlord Class Titan remains one of the most effective instruments of war available to the Imperium, yet its complexity introduces layers of interaction that extend beyond conventional mechanical systems. The integration of human cognition, machine spirit dynamics, and environmental influence creates a profile that demands continuous oversight. From the Inquisition perspective, the Titan's value is inseparable from its risk profile. Its ability to dominate the battlefield is matched by the necessity to monitor the conditions under which that dominance is maintained. The warning signs identified are not indicators of inevitable failure, but of thresholds that must be respected to preserve control and predictability. In final assessment, the Warlord Class Titan stands as both a proven asset and an enduring subject of investigation. Its continued deployment reflects the Imperium's reliance on its capabilities, while the persistence of unresolved questions ensures that it remains under scrutiny. The balance between utilization and observation defines the Inquisition's approach, maintaining the Titan as a central component of Imperial warfare, while acknowledging the need for vigilance in the face of complexity that is not entirely understood.